Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Marcus Brown adjusted his tactical watch as he surveyed the 30-acre property he'd purchased in the hills of Montana. The morning mist clung to the pine trees like ghosts, and the silence was broken only by the distant call of a hawk. This land represented everything he'd fought for during his 12 years as a Marine Recon operator: peace, security, and a place to build something lasting with his wife. At 42, Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and survived. His steel-gray eyes missed nothing, a habit ingrained from countless missions in hostile territory. The scars on his hands told stories of close-quarters combat, but it was his mind that truly made him dangerous, strategic, patient, and utterly unforgiving to those who crossed him. He'd met Sabrina Stark at a veterans charity gala 5 years ago. She was 28 then, a stunning brunette with emerald eyes and a smile that could disarm a room. Sabrina worked as a real estate agent, specializing in luxury properties for wealthy clients. She'd approached him that night, claiming she was fascinated by his military service. Within 6 months, they were married. Sabrina had seemed perfect, supportive of his transition to civilian life, enthusiastic about their move to Montana, and understanding when his PTSD occasionally surfaced. She'd helped him establish his private security consulting firm, leveraging her social connections to bring in high-paying clients. Their marriage appeared to be the American dream realized. But Marcus had learned in the Marines that appearances could be deadly deceptive. The first crack in their perfect facade had appeared 6 months ago. Sabrina began working late more frequently, claiming new developments required her attention. Her phone, once casually left around the house, was now permanently attached to her side. When Marcus tried to initiate intimacy, she'd cite exhaustion or stress. These weren't dramatic changes, but to a man trained in surveillance and threat assessment, they formed a pattern. Marcus had initially dismissed his suspicions as paranoia, a common struggle for combat veterans adjusting to civilian relationships. But last week, his instincts had sharpened when Sabrina announced a sudden business trip to Seattle. Something in her voice, a slight tremor when she said the destination, triggered his operational mindset. That evening, as Sabrina packed for her trip, Marcus activated the skills that had kept him alive in Afghanistan and Iraq. While she showered, he carefully photographed her phone screen, memorizing recent calls and messages. Using tradecraft learned from military intelligence, he placed a discreet GPS tracker in her purse, not because he wanted to spy on his wife, but because 13 years of combat had taught him that ignoring warning signs got people killed. The tracker never left town. Instead, it spent 3 days at the Riverside Motel on the outskirts of their small Montana community. Marcus had driven by on the second day and spotted Sabrina's white BMW in the parking lot. His military training had prevented him from confronting the situation immediately. Intelligence gathering always preceded action. Through the motel window, he'd seen her with Dennis Adams, a local police detective. Adams was 35, divorced, with a reputation for aggressive tactics and political ambitions. The man had approached Marcus twice at community events, asking probing questions about his military service and making subtle comments about how different life must be for veterans in small towns. Watching his wife in another man's arms had triggered something primal in Marcus, not heartbreak, but cold, calculating rage. In the Marines, betrayal by a teammate meant death. The rules of civilian life might be different, but Marcus Brown's personal code remained unchanged. Betrayal demanded consequences. Now, standing on his property as dawn broke over the mountains, Marcus felt the familiar weight of an impending mission. He'd spent the last week conducting surveillance, documenting Adam's routines, and analyzing Sabrina's behavior patterns. The intelligence picture was clear. This wasn't a recent affair, but a calculated deception that had been running for months. His phone buzzed with a text from Sabrina. "Another late showing tonight, honey. Don't wait up. Love you." Marcus smiled grimly. In 6 hours, Sabrina was scheduled to meet Adams at a secluded cabin the detective owned 15 miles outside town. Marcus had discovered the location through careful reconnaissance, and tonight, he planned to gather the final piece of intelligence he needed. As he walked back toward the house, Marcus felt the familiar calm that preceded action. His wife and her lover had made a critical error. They'd betrayed a Marine Recon operator who had never forgotten that survival meant eliminating threats before they eliminated you. The perfect life had been a lie, But Marcus Brown was about to write a very real ending. Chapter 2. Gathering Intelligence. Marcus spent the morning maintaining his equipment, cleaning firearms, checking surveillance gear, and reviewing satellite imagery of Dennis Adams' property. His home office, once a simple den, had been transformed into a tactical operations center during the past week. Maps, photographs, and timelines covered one wall, while secure communication equipment lined another. The routine of preparation brought him peace. In hostile territory, thorough planning meant the difference between mission success and body bags. This situation required the same methodical approach, despite the domestic setting. At noon, Sabrina returned from her morning appointments, her cheeks flushed and hair slightly mussed. She kissed Marcus on the cheek, her perfume carrying an unfamiliar scent, Adams' cologne, which Marcus had cataloged during his surveillance. "How was the showing?" he asked, not looking up from his laptop. "Challenging clients," she replied quickly. "They want to see 3 more properties this evening. I might be very late." Marcus nodded, noting the micro-expression of relief that flashed across her face. Sabrina had always been a poor liar, but her recent practice had improved her technique. Not enough to fool a man trained in interrogation, but sufficient for civilian social interactions. After she left for her supposed afternoon appointments, Marcus implemented Phase 2 of his intelligence operation. Using skills learned in military intelligence, he accessed Adams' digital footprint through publicly available information and social engineering. A phone call to the police department, claiming to be a federal contractor verifying employment for a security clearance, provided additional details about the detective's schedule and habits. Adams was ambitious, corrupt, and careless, a dangerous combination in law enforcement. The detective had been investigated twice for excessive force and once for accepting bribes from local business owners seeking favorable treatment. Each investigation had been quietly buried through political connections, but the pattern revealed a man who believed himself untouchable. At 4 p.m., Marcus positioned himself at an observation post overlooking Adams' cabin. The structure sat in a valley surrounded by dense forest, accessible only by a single dirt road. It was an ideal location for clandestine meetings, isolated, defensible, and far from prying eyes. Adams had chosen well, but he'd also created a perfect kill zone. Through high-powered optics, Marcus watched Adams arrive at 5:30, followed 20 minutes later by Sabrina. Their embrace in the doorway confirmed what Marcus already knew, but seeing it triggered a cold fury that reminded him of combat situations where enemies had targeted his unit. For 2 hours, Marcus documented their activities through the cabin's windows. The intelligence wasn't just about infidelity. He observed their body language, timing patterns, and security awareness. Adams kept his service weapon on the kitchen counter, within easy reach but carelessly positioned. Sabrina appeared nervous, frequently checking her phone and glancing toward the windows. Both were so focused on their passion that they'd failed to notice the elevated positions surrounding their location. As darkness fell, Marcus prepared to withdraw from his observation post. He'd gathered sufficient intelligence for Phase 3 of his operation. But as he packed his equipment, a glint of metal in the tree caught his attention. Someone else was watching the cabin. Marcus immediately went prone, using natural cover to observe the new presence. Through his scope, he identified a second surveillance position approximately 300 meters from his location. The occupant was using professional-grade equipment and maintained excellent fieldcraft. This wasn't a curious local or jealous spouse. For 30 minutes, Marcus studied the unknown observer. The individual's positioning, equipment, and discipline suggested military or law enforcement training. More concerning, the person appeared to be preparing for action beyond simple surveillance. At 9 p.m., as Adams and Sabrina prepared to leave the cabin, the unknown observer began moving. Marcus tracked the figure's approach through thermal imaging, noting the tactical movement patterns and what appeared to be a suppressed rifle. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Someone intended to kill Marcus Brown tonight, and they planned to do it while he was supposedly unaware of his wife's infidelity. The perfect setup, a grieving widow and her police detective lover investigating the mysterious death of a veteran with PTSD. Marcus smiled grimly in the darkness. His wife and her lover had orchestrated more than an affair. They'd planned his murder. But they'd made a fatal error in judgment. Marcus Brown wasn't a victim waiting to be eliminated. He was a predator who'd just identified his prey. As the assassin moved into position, Marcus began his own tactical approach. The hunter had become the hunted, but the roles were about to reverse. Tonight would end with blood, but it wouldn't be his. The game had begun, and Marcus intended to win. Chapter 3: The Sniper's Bullet. The shot came at 10:47 p.m., just as Marcus rounded the corner of his barn. The bullet whizzed past his head with the distinctive crack of a high-velocity round, splintering the wooden door frame where his skull had been milliseconds earlier. His Marine Recon training took over instantly, muscle memory from 100 combat situations flooding his system. Marcus dove left, rolling behind a concrete water trough as a second shot sparked off the metal rim. His mind processed the ballistic data automatically. Subsonic ammunition, suppressed rifle, approximately 150-meter range based on the sound delay. The shooter was positioned in the treeline overlooking his property's northern approach. In the darkness, Marcus smiled coldly. The assassin had made several critical errors. First, taking the shot from a static position rather than moving after the initial miss. Second, using subsonic rounds that sacrifice stopping power for stealth, a fatal compromise when targeting someone trained to fight wounded. Third, assuming Marcus would react like a civilian instead of a combat veteran. Moving with the fluid precision of special operations training, Marcus low-crawled toward his workshop, using terrain features to mask his movement. The building contained his operational equipment, weapons, communications gear, and night vision equipment that would shift the tactical advantage decisively in his favor. The assassin fired twice more, both shots missing as Marcus anticipated the shooter's lead calculations. Whoever this was had marksman training but lacked the combat experience to adapt when the situation deteriorated. Marcus reached his workshop and slipped inside through a concealed entrance he'd built during construction. Within 60 seconds, he'd armed himself with a suppressed M4 carbine and third-generation night vision equipment. The familiar weight of combat gear transformed him from potential victim to apex predator. Through the green-tinted display, he could see the muzzle flash of the assassin's rifle, a fatal error that revealed the shooter's exact position. Marcus exited through the workshop's rear door and began a tactical approach that would have impressed his old unit commanders. Using shadows and terrain, he moved in a wide arc that brought him behind the assassin's position. The shooter was focused entirely on the area where Marcus had disappeared, never imagining that his target was now hunting him. At 50 meters, Marcus could see the assassin clearly through his optics. The figure was male, mid-30s, wearing tactical gear and using professional equipment. More importantly, he was completely focused on the wrong area, expecting Marcus to emerge from cover like a panicked civilian. Marcus closed to 20 meters before speaking. "Drop the weapon." The assassin spun toward the voice, rifle swinging in Marcus's direction. It was the last mistake he would ever make. Marcus fired twice, precise shots to center mass that dropped the man instantly. The suppressed rounds made no more sound than a pneumatic tool, and the threat was neutralized before he could cry out. Moving quickly to the body, Marcus conducted a tactical search. The assassin carried no identification, but his equipment told a story. The rifle was a Remington 700 with high-end optics, expensive but not military issue. The gear was professional grade but purchased commercially rather than military surplus. This was a hired killer, not a military operator. Marcus found the man's phone and quickly scrolled through recent messages. His blood ran cold as he read the conversation thread. Target acquired. Taking the shot now. Copy. Make sure it looks like a robbery gone wrong. Understood. We'll stage the scene after. The final message, sent just minutes before the attack, made Marcus's jaw clench. Package delivered. Moving to extraction point. But there was one more message, sent after the shooting began. Plan compromised. Target is armed and dangerous. Requesting immediate backup. And the response that confirmed Marcus's darkest suspicions. Negative. Abort mission and eliminate all traces. The arrangement is void. The phone's contact list contained only two numbers, one labeled Control and another simply marked S. Marcus didn't need intelligence training to decode that second entry. He quickly photographed the messages before checking the assassin's body for additional intelligence. Hidden in a concealed pocket, he found a thick envelope containing $20,000 in cash and a brief note. Half now, half when confirmed. Make it clean. The handwriting was unmistakably feminine and familiar. Marcus felt the cold rage that had sustained him through the worst combat missions. His wife hadn't just been cheating, she'd been planning his murder. The affair with Adams was likely part of the setup, establishing the detective as the grieving boyfriend who would investigate Marcus's tragic death and ensure the case remained unsolved. He moved quickly to stage the scene. Using the assassin's own weapon, he put a single round through the man's head to match the story he was about to tell. Then he dragged the body to a position that supported his narrative. Marcus pulled out his phone and composed a text message to his wife. Target down. Meet at the house to pay. The response came within minutes. On my way. Is it done? Marcus smiled grimly as he typed back. Come see for yourself. 30 minutes later, headlights approached his property. Through his night vision equipment, Marcus watched Sabrina's BMW pull into the driveway, followed closely by Dennis Adams' unmarked police cruiser. His wife and her lover were coming to confirm his death and probably plant evidence to support their cover story. Instead, they were walking into a trap set by a man who'd spent 13 years learning how to kill people who threatened American interests. Tonight, they would discover that Marcus Brown considered them enemy combatants operating on his sovereign territory. As he watched them approach his front door, Marcus felt the familiar calm that preceded close-quarters combat. The mission parameters were clear: eliminate the threats that had betrayed his trust and tried to end his life. Their night was about to end in body bags, just as he'd promised. But first, he wanted them to understand exactly how completely they'd underestimated their target. The hunt was about to become an execution. Chapter 4. The Investigation. Marcus watched from his concealed position as Sabrina and Adams approached the house with obvious anxiety. Through thermal imaging, he could see their elevated heart rates and nervous movements. They expected to find his corpse, not an empty house with all the lights off. Marcus, Sabrina called out, her voice carrying false concern. Honey, are you okay? I got your text about trouble. Adams had his hand on his service weapon, scanning the darkness with the inadequate flashlight attachment on his gun. The detective's tactical positioning revealed minimal combat training. He moved like someone who'd learned from police academy simulations rather than real-world experience. Marcus remained motionless in his hide site, gathering intelligence on their operation. Through sensitive audio equipment, he recorded their conversation as they approached the front door. Something's wrong, Adams muttered. The shooter confirmed the hit an hour ago. Maybe Marcus is inside, Sabrina replied, but her tone suggested she hoped otherwise. The text said to meet here for payment. That wasn't the arrangement, Adams said sharply. Payment was supposed to happen at the secondary location after confirmation. Why would he change the plan? Marcus smiled coldly. They were discussing his murder with the casual efficiency of ordering takeout food. Any lingering doubt about their intentions evaporated as he listened to them coordinate the logistics of collecting his life insurance policy. Let's check the barn, Sabrina suggested. Maybe something went wrong and Marcus fought back. As they moved toward the outbuilding where the supposed shooting had occurred, Marcus activated Phase 2 of his intelligence operation. Using equipment acquired during his government service, he penetrated Adams' personal communications and began downloading the detective's digital correspondence. The information was damning beyond Marcus's expectations. Adams had been planning this operation for 8 months, carefully researching Marcus's military background and identifying potential vulnerabilities. The detective had specifically recruited Sabrina through her real estate connections, targeting her because of her access to Marcus's financial information and daily routines. But the conspiracy went deeper than simple murder for money. Adams was being pressured by FBI investigators looking into his corruption activities. The detective needed a substantial sum to disappear before federal charges were filed, and Marcus's life insurance provided the perfect solution. Sabrina's inheritance would be shared equally, giving both conspirators enough money to start new lives in non-extradition countries. More disturbing was the evidence that this wasn't their first collaboration. Adams and Sabrina had been systematically targeting wealthy older men for the past 3 years. 2 previous husbands had died in suspicious accidents that Adams had investigated personally, ensuring the cases remained unsolved. Marcus was intended to be their final score before international relocation. As Marcus processed this intelligence, he heard Sabrina scream from inside the barn. They'd discovered the assassin's body, staged to look like Marcus had killed his attacker before succumbing to his own wounds. But Marcus's corpse was notably absent, creating a problem neither conspirator had anticipated. Where the hell is he? Adam snarled, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. The shooter confirmed the kill. Marcus should be right here. Maybe he crawled away wounded, Sabrina suggested, but her tone revealed growing panic. We need to find him before he bleeds out and calls for help. No, Adam said grimly. If Marcus survived the initial attack, he's not wounded. He's hunting us. We need to get out of here immediately. Marcus was impressed despite himself. The detective had finally displayed tactical intelligence, recognizing that a wounded Marine Recon operator was infinitely more dangerous than a dead one. Unfortunately for Adams, this realization had come several hours too late to save either conspirator. As they hurried back toward their vehicles, Marcus implemented the next phase of his operation. Using commercial-grade jammers, he disabled their cell phone communications and activated GPS spoofing equipment that would confuse their navigation systems. The property was now electronically isolated, preventing outside communication while masking its exact location from any digital tracking. My phone's dead, Sabrina said, panic rising in her voice. No signal at all. Mine too, Adams confirmed. He's jamming us. Marcus knows we're here, and he's controlling the tactical environment. They reached their cars, but both vehicles failed to start. Marcus had disabled their engines during their investigation of the barn, using skills learned during vehicle interdiction training. The conspirators were now trapped on his property, isolated from help and facing an opponent who knew the terrain intimately. We're walking out, Adams declared, drawing his service weapon. Stay close and watch for movement. Marcus is trained, but he's outnumbered and we have the advantage of. His words were cut off by the distinctive sound of a rifle bolt cycling nearby. Marcus had positioned himself to create maximum psychological pressure, letting them hear him without revealing his location. The advantage of what, detective? Marcus's voice echoed from multiple directions, amplified by speakers he'd placed around the property during previous weeks. Superior numbers? Better training? Local knowledge. Adam spun in circles, trying to identify the source of the voice while Sabrina pressed herself against the BMW in terror. Marcus, please, she called out. I can explain everything. This isn't what it looks like. You're right, Sabrina, Marcus replied, his voice now coming from a different direction. It's much worse than it looks. You didn't just betray our marriage. You tried to have me murdered. That makes you enemy combatants operating on American soil. The psychological warfare was having its intended effect. Adams was sweating profusely despite the cool mountain air, and Sabrina appeared close to complete breakdown. But Marcus wasn't finished gathering intelligence. He needed to know the full scope of their operation and identify any additional threats. How many others know about tonight? He asked, his voice now seeming to come from directly above them. Nobody, Adams said quickly. This was between us and the contractor. Liar, Marcus replied coldly. The FBI investigation into your activities suggests otherwise. Who else was supposed to benefit from my death? The silence that followed confirmed Marcus's suspicions. This conspiracy involved additional players who would need to be identified and neutralized. His mission had expanded beyond simple personal revenge to include protecting national security interests. The hunt would continue, but first, he needed to extract complete intelligence from his current prisoners. And prisoners they were, despite being unrestrained and armed. Marcus controlled every aspect of their environment, making escape impossible while maintaining complete tactical superiority. The interrogation was about to begin. Chapter 5, Setting the Trap. Marcus observed his trapped conspirators from multiple vantage points using the extensive surveillance network he'd established around his property. The night vision cameras provided complete coverage while motion sensors tracked their movements in real time. Adams and Sabrina huddled near their disabled vehicles, whispering frantically about escape options that didn't exist. We need to reach the main road, Adams said, studying the darkness around them. It's only 2 miles through the forest. We can call for backup once we get cell service. I'm not walking through those woods at night, Sabrina replied, her voice shaking. Marcus knows every inch of this property. He'll pick us off before we make it 100 yards. Marcus smiled grimly at her tactical assessment. Sabrina was finally displaying the intelligence that had attracted him initially, but her insight had come too late to save her life. Still, he needed them to attempt escape. It would provide the perfect opportunity to demonstrate his complete control over their situation. Using his communications array, Marcus activated speakers positioned along the forest trail leading to the main road. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the trees, suggesting help was on the way. Both conspirators immediately began moving toward the noise, abandoning their defensive position near the cars. "That must be the backup team," Adams said with relief. "They must have gotten worried when we didn't report in." Marcus tracked their progress through thermal imaging as they stumbled through the forest, following the false audio signals he was broadcasting. Every few minutes, he adjusted the sound's location, drawing them deeper into the woods and further from any genuine escape route. 20 minutes into their trek, Marcus triggered the first demonstration of his superior position. Using remote-controlled pyrotechnics, he detonated a series of flashbang charges around their location. The blinding light and deafening noise sent both conspirators diving for cover, while Marcus shifted to a new observation position. Warning shots. His amplified voice echoed through the forest. "You're being herded like cattle, and you don't even realize it. Every step you take is exactly where I want you to go." "He's playing with us," Adams snarled, trying to maintain composure. "This is psychological warfare. Keep moving toward the road." But as they continued their escape attempt, Marcus revealed the true scope of his preparation. Motion-activated lights began illuminating around them in sequence, creating a pathway that led not toward the main road, but deeper into his property. Confused and disoriented, they followed the lights like moths drawn to flame. "Where are we?" Sabrina asked, panic evident in her voice. "This isn't the way to the road. We've been walking in circles." Marcus had led them to a clearing in the center of his property, a natural amphitheater surrounded by elevated positions that provided perfect fields of fire. Years ago, he'd chosen this location for tactical training exercises, never imagining he'd use it for a real-world operation. "Welcome to the killing field," Marcus announced, his voice now coming from multiple directions simultaneously. "This is where trained operators eliminate multiple targets in controlled environments. You have front-row seats for tonight's demonstration." Floodlights suddenly illuminated the clearing, temporarily blinding Adams and Sabrina while revealing their complete vulnerability. They stood in the center of an open area with no cover, surrounded by elevated positions that could conceal multiple shooters. "Marcus, stop this insanity," Sabrina screamed. "You're talking like a terrorist. We can work this out. Nobody has to die tonight." "2 people are already dead," Marcus replied coldly. "The assassin you hired, and the Marcus Brown who trusted you. What remains is a combat veteran eliminating enemy combatants who threatened American lives." Adams had been scanning the tree line, trying to identify Marcus's position. The detective's training was inadequate for this situation, but his survival instincts were functioning. "He's not going to kill us here," Adams told Sabrina. "Too much evidence, too many witnesses. This is intimidation." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing eerily through the speakers. "Evidence? Detective, you're standing on my property in the middle of the night after attempting to murder me. Your own police department will conclude you were involved in criminal activity that got you killed. As for witnesses," he paused dramatically before continuing. "Who exactly do you think will witness anything? Your FBI contacts who are investigating your corruption? The hired killer lying dead in my barn? Or perhaps the other victims you've murdered over the past 3 years?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus had revealed his knowledge of their previous crimes, making it clear that simple explanations wouldn't resolve their situation. "How much do you know?" Adams asked quietly. "Everything," Marcus replied. "Bank records showing unusual deposits after your previous husband's deaths. Communication logs between you and Sabrina dating back 3 years. Evidence of your FBI investigation and the pressure that drove you to target me specifically." Sabrina collapsed to her knees, finally understanding the hopelessness of their situation. "Marcus, please. I made a mistake. I got involved with something I couldn't control. You know me, I'm not a killer." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "You're not a killer. You're something worse, a predator who uses intimacy as a weapon. At least soldiers kill enemies. You murder people who love you." The psychological pressure was having its intended effect, but Marcus wasn't finished. He needed complete confessions documenting their crimes, recorded evidence that would justify what happened tonight and protect him from future legal consequences. "Here's how this works," he announced. "You're going to tell me everything about your operation. Names, dates, methods, and financial arrangements. In exchange, I'll consider letting you live long enough to face justice through proper legal channels. And if we refuse? Adams asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then you'll discover why Marine Recon operators are taught to extract information from uncooperative subjects. Marcus replied. I have all night, and this property is completely isolated. No one will hear you scream. The interrogation was about to begin, and Marcus intended to gather every piece of intelligence they possessed. By dawn, he would know the full scope of their criminal enterprise and be able to identify any remaining threats. But first, he wanted them to understand exactly how completely they had underestimated their target. The lesson would be brief, brutal, and final. Chapter 6. The Confession. Marcus descended into the clearing with the silent precision of a predator claiming his territory. He wore full tactical gear, night vision equipment, body armor, and enough weaponry to outfit a small squad. The psychological impact was immediate. Sabrina whimpered and pressed herself against Adams, while the detective instinctively reached for his service weapon. I wouldn't, Marcus said calmly, his rifle trained on Adams' center mass. You're outgunned, outmanned, and completely outclassed. Your only chance of seeing sunrise is complete cooperation. Adams slowly raised his hands, recognizing the tactical superiority of his opponent. What do you want to know? Everything. Marcus activated a digital recorder, ensuring their confessions would be preserved. Start with how many people you've murdered and work your way up to tonight's operation. For the next hour, Marcus extracted a complete intelligence picture of their criminal enterprise. The scope was staggering. 7 men murdered over 3 years, each one carefully selected for their wealth and isolated social situations. Sabrina would seduce the targets while Adams conducted background investigations to ensure their deaths wouldn't trigger extensive police scrutiny. The insurance payouts alone totaled over $4 million, Adams admitted, sweat dripping despite the cool mountain air. We split everything equally and used the money to finance the next operation. And the FBI investigation? Marcus prompted. They were closing in on my financial irregularities, Adams said. I needed one final score to disappear permanently. Your military pension and life insurance policy made you the perfect target. Marcus felt cold rage building as they described their methodical approach to murder. These weren't crimes of passion or desperation. They were calculated business decisions made by predators who viewed human life as commodity. Who else knows about your operation? He asked. Sabrina and Adams exchanged glances before Adams spoke. My brother Kirk Ballard helped with the initial target selection. He works for an insurance company and identified wealthy policy holders in isolated locations. Where is he now? Seattle, Sabrina said quickly. He doesn't know about tonight's operation. We kept him compartmentalized for security reasons. Marcus made mental notes of additional targets requiring neutralization. Kirk Ballard represented a loose end that could expose the entire operation if left alive. The mission was expanding, but Marcus had resources and skills sufficient for multiple eliminations. Tell me about the assassin, he continued. Professional contractor from Portland, Adams replied. We hired him through encrypted communications and paid in untraceable cryptocurrency. He was supposed to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. His name? Johnny Petty. Ex-military like you. But he got dishonorably discharged for war crimes in Iraq. He's been working as a hired killer for the past 5 years. Marcus filed this information for future reference. If Petty had criminal contacts, they might represent additional threats requiring elimination. The web of conspiracy was larger than initially suspected. How did you plan to explain my death to investigators? Sabrina answered with disturbing matter-of-fact precision. You'd been acting paranoid lately, checking security systems obsessively and mentioning threats from your military service. We planted evidence of PTSD episodes and made sure neighbors noticed your increasingly erratic behavior. The narrative was perfect, Adams added. Disturbed veteran kills home invader but dies from his wounds. I would have personally investigated the case and ensured it was closed quickly with minimal scrutiny. Marcus realized how thoroughly they'd planned his destruction. Not content with simply murdering him, they'd intended to posthumously destroy his reputation and legacy. The psychological cruelty of their scheme exceeded even his worst expectations. Any other associates? No, Adams said firmly. We kept the operation limited to essential personnel only. Sabrina, myself, my brother, and the hired contractors. That's it. Marcus studied their body language through his night vision equipment. Both appeared to be telling the truth, but he'd learned in combat that enemies often concealed critical information until the final moment. Additional verification would be required. Excellent, he said with cold satisfaction. You've provided valuable intelligence about your criminal enterprise. Unfortunately for you, this information also confirms that you're both guilty of multiple premeditated murders. Marcus, we can make this right, Sabrina pleaded desperately. We'll return all the money. We'll confess to the authorities. Nobody else has to die. You're correct, Marcus agreed. Nobody else innocent has to die. But you're not innocent. You're enemy combatants who declared war on American citizens. Military rules of engagement apply. Adams made a final desperate play for his life. You can't just execute us. You're not in a combat zone. This is murder, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Marcus smiled grimly. Detective, you have no authority to negotiate or threaten. You're prisoners of war being held by a Marine who's already been declared dead by your own operation. Officially, I don't exist to carry out any executions. The realization of their helplessness settled over both conspirators like a death shroud. They'd trapped themselves through their own deception, creating the perfect circumstances for their elimination. Besides, Marcus continued, I'm not going to execute you. That would be too quick and merciful for what you've done. He gestured toward the tree line, where additional figures emerged carrying weapons and military equipment. I'd like you to meet some old friends from my unit. They're very interested in discussing your crimes against American veterans. Sabrina screamed as she recognized the implication. Marcus hadn't been operating alone. He'd assembled a team of combat veterans who shared his views on justice for those who betrayed their brothers in arms. The interrogation was complete, but the punishment phase was just beginning, and Marcus intended for it to last until dawn. Chapter 7. The team assembles. The figures emerging from the tree line moved with the coordinated precision of a military unit conducting a planned operation. Marcus counted 8 men, former teammates from his Marine Recon days who'd answered his call for assistance. Each carried professional equipment and displayed the quiet confidence of operators who'd survived multiple combat deployments. Leading the group was Sergeant Major Warren Lambert, Marcus's former unit commander and the closest thing to a father figure he'd known in the Corps. At 55, Lambert remained in fighting condition, his silver hair and weathered face carrying the authority of 3 decades in special operations. Sir, Marcus acknowledged formally. Thank you for responding. Marcus, Lambert replied, his voice carrying the gravitas of countless battlefield decisions. You said these people murdered veterans. We don't let that go unpunished. Behind Lambert stood Gunnery Sergeant Rex Chan, a weapons specialist whose expertise with explosives had saved their unit multiple times in Afghanistan. Beside him, Corporal Isaac Adams, no relation to the detective, served as their communications expert and electronic warfare specialist. The remaining team members represented the core of Marcus's former squad: snipers, medics, intelligence analysts, and assault specialists who'd learned to function as a single organism during their overseas deployments. These men had shared foxholes and saved each other's lives in places most Americans couldn't pronounce. Jesus Christ, Dennis Adams whispered, recognizing the tactical situation had shifted dramatically. You've got a whole goddamn platoon out here. Not a platoon, Lambert corrected coldly. A tribunal. We're here to render judgment on enemies who've attacked our brothers. Sabrina looked between the armed men surrounding her, finally understanding that her charm and manipulation tactics were useless against operators who'd faced real enemies in actual combat. This is illegal. You can't just form a vigilante group and— Ma'am, Rex Chan interrupted politely, we're not vigilantes. We're combat veterans exercising our duty to protect American citizens from domestic enemies. The Constitution we swore to defend includes provisions for dealing with traitors. Isaac Adams activated electronic jamming equipment that would prevent any outside communication while masking their activities from satellite surveillance. The area is now electronically secure, he reported. No outside observation or interference possible. Marcus felt the familiar comfort of operating with his old team. These men understood loyalty, sacrifice, and the absolute necessity of eliminating threats to innocent Americans. Unlike civilian law enforcement, they had no bureaucratic constraints or political considerations limiting their effectiveness. What's the intelligence picture? Lambert asked, accepting the digital recorder containing Adams and Sabrina's confessions. 7 confirmed murders over 3 years, Marcus reported. Multiple conspiracy charges, federal law enforcement corruption, and attempted murder of a United States Marine. Additional suspects include Detective Adams' brother in Seattle and potentially other associates. Lambert nodded grimly. Rules of engagement? Full spectrum response authorized, Marcus replied, using military terminology that carried specific meaning among special operations personnel. Enemy combatants have forfeited legal protections through their actions against American citizens. The formal exchange established clear command authority and operational parameters. Lambert, as senior enlisted, would oversee the tribunal while Marcus retained tactical command as the primary injured party. The other team members would serve as both jury and execution squad. Dennis Adams, Lambert announced formally, you stand accused of multiple counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, corruption of federal law enforcement, and treason against the United States of America. How do you answer these charges? This isn't a real court, Adams protested. You have no legal authority to. Military tribunals operate under different authority than civilian courts, Recon explained matter-of-factly. We're not bound by the same procedural requirements when dealing with enemy combatants on American soil. Sabrina Brown, Lambert continued, you stand accused of multiple counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and sedition against American citizens. How do you answer these charges? I want a lawyer, Sabrina said desperately. I have rights under the Constitution. You forfeited those rights when you declared war on American veterans, Isaac Adams replied. Enemy combatants don't get lawyers. Marcus observed the proceedings with satisfaction. His former teammates were following established protocols for dealing with high-value targets who posed ongoing threats to national security. The formal structure provided legitimacy to what might otherwise appear as vigilante justice. The accused have refused to enter pleas, Lambert announced. Based on recorded confessions and physical evidence, this tribunal finds both defendants guilty of all charges. Sentencing will commence immediately. Wait, Dennis Adams said quickly, panic finally overcoming his detective's training. I can provide additional intelligence. Names, locations, financial accounts. There's more to this operation than what we told you. Lambert paused, considering the offer. Intelligence value often outweighed immediate justice in military operations. What additional information? There's a network, Adams said rapidly. Other law enforcement officers in different states. We're not the only team doing this. There's coordination at the federal level. Marcus felt cold satisfaction as the scope of their discovery expanded. What they'd uncovered wasn't just a local criminal enterprise, but a broader conspiracy against American veterans. The mission parameters were expanding, but so were the resources available to address the threat. How many others? Lambert demanded. At least 6 teams that I know about, Adams replied. Portland, Denver, Atlanta, Dallas, Phoenix, and Buffalo, all targeting veterans with substantial insurance policies or pension benefits. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't an isolated incident, but a systematic campaign against the American military community. Lambert's expression shifted from judicial proceedings to combat planning as he processed the intelligence. We're going to need more resources, he told Marcus quietly. This is bigger than a local operation. Marcus nodded agreement. I'll contact our network. We have people in all those cities who can handle simultaneous operations. The tribunal had discovered a target-rich environment that required immediate action. But first, they needed to complete the local operation and extract every piece of intelligence their prisoners possessed. The interrogation was about to become much more intensive. Chapter 8. Network Exposed. The revelation of a nationwide conspiracy transformed the operation from personal revenge to national security mission. Lambert immediately activated his communications equipment, establishing encrypted contact with veteran networks across the country. Within 30 minutes, he'd confirmed suspicious deaths matching Adams' description in all 6 cities mentioned. It's worse than we thought, Lambert reported grimly. Portland shows 11 veteran deaths in the past 2 years, all investigated by the same detective. Denver has 15, all with similar patterns. We're looking at potentially hundreds of murders. Marcus felt the cold rage that had sustained him through the worst combat missions. This wasn't just about his personal betrayal. These predators had been systematically exterminating American heroes for profit. The scope demanded a proportional response. "Sir," Isaac Adams announced from his monitoring station, "I'm intercepting encrypted communications from the Seattle area. Someone's trying to contact Detective Adams about tonight's operation." Lambert gestured for the communications to be routed through speakers so everyone could hear. A voice with a slight accent, presumably Kirk Ballard, was leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. "Dennis, where the hell are you? The Portland contact says their operation was compromised tonight. FBI is asking questions about veteran death patterns. We need to activate extraction protocols immediately." The messages confirmed that the conspiracy extended beyond murder for profit. These people had established operational security procedures and contingency plans suggesting significant organization and funding. "There's more," Isaac continued, monitoring additional frequencies. "I'm detecting similar communications in Atlanta and Phoenix. Someone's coordinating a nationwide response to tonight's events." Marcus realized they'd stumbled into a larger intelligence operation. The veteran murders were generating data being collected by unknown entities, possibly foreign intelligence services identifying and eliminating trained American military personnel. "This could be national security level," he told Lambert quietly. "We need to contact government sources." "Negative," Lambert replied firmly. "Adams proved that federal law enforcement is compromised. We handle this through military channels only." As if summoned by their conversation, Dennis Adams began speaking rapidly. "You don't understand the full picture. This isn't just about insurance money. We're collecting intelligence on veteran capabilities and eliminating high-value targets." "Explain," Lambert demanded. "The operation is funded by overseas sources," Adams continued desperately. "Chinese intelligence, specifically. They're paying premium rates for detailed information about special operations veterans living in isolated areas." The revelation sent shock waves through the assembled team. Foreign enemies were systematically identifying and eliminating American special operations personnel on domestic soil. This represented an act of war disguised as criminal activity. "How long has this been running?" Marcus asked. 3 years that I know about," Adams replied. "But the recruitment started earlier. They approached corrupt law enforcement officers with access to veteran databases and offered substantial payments for specific intelligence." "What kind of intelligence?" "Everything. Service records, current addresses, financial status, family situations, medical conditions, and tactical capabilities. They wanted complete profiles on every special operations veteran in targeted areas." Rex Chan spoke for the entire team. "They're building target lists for future operations." The implications were terrifying. Foreign intelligence services weren't just murdering veterans. They were eliminating potential resistance leaders in preparation for future conflicts. Every death reduced America's capacity to respond to domestic threats. "We need those databases," Lambert declared. "Full intelligence picture on their collection activities." Adams nodded eagerly. "I can provide access codes and contact information. Everything is stored on encrypted servers in Seattle." "What about the overseas contacts?" Marcus asked. "Handled through intermediaries." Sabrina spoke for the first time in an hour. "We never had direct contact with foreign intelligence. Everything went through American citizens who claimed to be private investigators or insurance fraud specialists." "Names," Lambert demanded. For the next 2 hours, Adams and Sabrina provided detailed intelligence about their handlers, communication protocols, and operational procedures. The network was massive, hundreds of corrupted law enforcement officers, private investigators, and criminal contractors working to systematically eliminate American military veterans. "The Chinese are paying bonuses for special operations personnel," Adams revealed. "Marine Recon, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Air Force Special Operations. Anyone with high-level training is worth premium rates." Marcus understood the strategic logic. Foreign enemies recognized that trained American veterans represented the greatest threat to occupation or invasion forces. Eliminating them preemptively would significantly reduce resistance capabilities. "How many veterans have been killed nationwide?" Lambert asked. "I don't know the exact number," Adams admitted. "But our team alone eliminated over 40 people in 3 years. If all 6 teams maintained similar productivity." Rex Chan did the mathematics quickly. "Over 200 confirmed kills, potentially many more if additional teams exist. The scope demanded immediate action. Every hour of delay meant more veterans would die while foreign enemies gathered intelligence on remaining targets. The mission had expanded beyond local justice to national defense. "We're activating the network," Lambert announced, referring to the informal organization of special operations veterans who maintained contact across the country. Full-spectrum operations in all target cities simultaneously. "What about these two?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward their prisoners. Lambert considered the question carefully. Adams and Sabrina possessed critical intelligence, but they also represented ongoing security risks. Their knowledge of the broader operation made them valuable assets, but their willingness to betray American interests made them unreliable. "They've provided useful intelligence," Lambert said finally, "but they're enemy combatants who've committed acts of war against American citizens. Military justice applies." The formal pronouncement carried the weight of battlefield decision-making. These people had forfeited their lives through their actions against American veterans. No further deliberation was required. But Marcus had one final phase of his personal revenge to complete before the larger operation commenced. Sabrina and Adams had tried to destroy him personally, and he intended to ensure they understood the consequences of their betrayal. The execution phase was about to begin, but first, he wanted them to experience the same fear their victims had felt in their final moments. Chapter 9, Justice Delivered. As dawn approached over the Montana mountains, Marcus stood before his assembled team and the two people who had tried to destroy his life. The night's revelations had transformed his personal revenge into a matter of national security, but he refused to let the larger mission overshadow the intimate betrayal he'd suffered. "Sabrina," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of 5 years of marriage and trust. "You shared my bed, ate at my table, and let me believe you loved me, all while planning my murder." She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. The beautiful woman who'd once promised to honor and cherish him now revealed as a predator who'd targeted him for assassination. "Marcus, I did love you," she whispered. "At first, it was supposed to be just another job, but I fell in love with you for real. I tried to call it off, but Dennis said it was too late to back out." "Liar," Marcus replied coldly. "You recorded our intimate conversations to gather intelligence about my military service. You mapped my daily routines and identified my vulnerabilities. You never loved me. You studied me like a target." Adams remained silent, recognizing that his fate was sealed regardless of what he said. The detective's law enforcement training had taught him to recognize hopeless tactical situations, and this qualified completely. Lambert approached Marcus with the formal bearing of a commanding officer delivering final orders. "The network is activated. Teams are moving against targets in all 6 cities. Seattle, Portland, Denver, Atlanta, Dallas, and Phoenix operations will commence at 0600 local time." Marcus nodded acknowledgement. Across the country, veteran teams were preparing to eliminate the traitors who'd murdered their brothers in arms. The response would be swift, coordinated, and utterly merciless. "What about the overseas connections?" Marcus asked. "Special Activities Division is handling that aspect," Lambert replied, referring to the military's most classified operational units. "Chinese intelligence officers involved in this operation will receive appropriate responses through diplomatic channels." The bureaucratic language concealed the reality that foreign intelligence operatives on American soil would simply disappear, their deaths attributed to accidents or criminal activity. The United States military didn't tolerate foreign enemies targeting American veterans. "Sir," Rex Chan reported, "we have confirmation from all target cities. Operations are green across the board. Estimated enemy casualties will exceed 300 personnel by end of day." Marcus felt satisfaction at the scope of the response. The predators who targeted American veterans would be eliminated systematically, their network dismantled completely. But his personal mission required a more intimate resolution. "Dennis Adams," Marcus announced formally, "you corrupted your oath as a law enforcement officer to betray the citizens you swore to protect. You specifically targeted American veterans, turning your authority against the people who defended your freedom." "Marcus, listen," Adams said desperately. "I can still provide intelligence. There are offshore accounts, additional contacts, operational details you haven't discovered yet." "Intelligence gathering phase is complete," Lambert interjected. "Electronic analysis of communications provided sufficient data for network-wide operations. Additional information is no longer required. Isaac Adams had spent the night penetrating every electronic device the conspirators possessed, extracting terabytes of data that revealed the full scope of their treasonous activities. Bank records, communication logs, target lists, and operational procedures, everything needed to dismantle their network permanently. Sabrina Brown, Marcus continued, you used the sacred institution of marriage as a weapon to destroy innocent people. You violated the most fundamental human bonds to facilitate mass murder. She sobbed uncontrollably now, finally understanding that her charm and manipulation tactics had no power over men who'd seen real evil in combat zones around the world. The tribunal has rendered its verdict, Lambert announced formally. Both defendants are guilty of treason, murder, and conspiracy against the United States of America. Sentence is death, to be carried out immediately. Wait, Sabrina pleaded desperately. I'm pregnant. You can't kill an unborn baby for my crimes. Marcus felt momentary hesitation before Rex Chan spoke quietly. Ma'am, medical examination conducted during processing indicates no pregnancy. Deception won't save your life. The lie represented her final attempt to manipulate him, even facing execution. Any lingering emotional connection Marcus might have felt evaporated completely. Execute the sentence, he ordered coldly. Lambert gestured to the assembled team, who raised their weapons with military precision. Both Adams and Sabrina faced their executioners with the dignity they denied their victims. Any final words? Lambert asked formally. Adams remained silent, but Sabrina looked directly at Marcus. I did love you, she said quietly. That's the only true thing I ever told you. Then you should have acted like it, Marcus replied. The volley of shots echoed across the mountain valley, ending the lives of two people who declared war on American veterans. Their bodies fell beside each other in the clearing where they'd expected to celebrate Marcus's death. As the team began cleanup operations, Marcus felt the familiar emptiness that followed combat missions. Justice had been served, but victory never brought back the dead or restored what had been lost. Sir, Isaac Adams reported, nationwide operations are complete. Network eliminated, overseas connections severed, database destroyed. Threat neutralized. Lambert nodded satisfaction. Outstanding work. All teams extract to safe houses for debriefing. As his teammates prepared to depart, Marcus remained standing over the bodies of his wife and her lover. 5 years of marriage had ended in a Montana clearing with military justice rendered by men who understood the absolute necessity of eliminating traitors. You coming with us? Lambert asked. Marcus looked around his property, the land he'd purchased to build a peaceful life with someone who'd never existed. The dream was dead, but he'd survived to fight another day. Negative, sir, he replied. I'm staying. This is still my home. Lambert nodded understanding. If you need anything, you know how to reach us. As his team disappeared into the forest, Marcus stood alone with his thoughts and his dead enemies. The sun was rising over the mountains, illuminating a world where American veterans were safer because of the night's work. He'd lost everything he thought mattered, his wife, his marriage, his peaceful retirement. But he'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that he was still a Marine, still a protector, still willing to kill America's enemies regardless of where they appeared. Marcus Brown walked back toward his house, planning his next mission. The network was destroyed, but individual threats remained. And he had nothing but time and skills to hunt them down. The war never really ended for men like him. It just moved to new battlefields. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.